Hello there, I'm Ger McDermott. Well, Riksbank today left rates unchanged, and I have Mikael Sarwe, Head of Research and Strategy for Sweden, on the line. Hi Mikael, first of all, what do you think of today's decision, and was this something you were actually expecting?
It was definitely what we were expecting. It's been the case that going into this meeting, there was a period in April, May, where data was a little bit on the weak side, and then sort of the expectations of a possible rate cut started to increase. But the last round of data, being manufacturing PMIs, unemployment, inflation, has been definitely more in line with the Riksbank scenarios, and thereby it was quite straightforward that they were going to leave the repo rate unchanged.
They also maintained a forecast for tightening to start in the second half of next year, after Corona sell-off helped bring inflation closer to target. Now, in terms of inflation, what are your forecasts?
We would say that if we look at the various leading indicators of inflation, and particularly on the domestic side, we are definitely at Nordea has a lower inflation forecast than the Riksbank. So if we look at underlying inflation, that is excluding energy, the Riksbank basically has an inflation forecast of inflation coming back to 2% early 2015. We still believe that type of inflation will stay a bit below, and even below 1.5% all the way through 2014. So we still believe and have believed for some time that the Riksbank have a too high inflation forecast basically, and they continue to have that.
And what has the performance of the Swedish krona been like recently?
We had a period from the middle of June where the krona weakened, particularly versus the euro, and that was very much driven, I guess, by risk-off sentiment in the equity markets falling and things like that. Since then, into the meeting, the krona has been strengthening somewhat, but on today we saw a slight weakening this morning ahead of the Riksbank meeting, which I guess had to do with there are always some sort of risk that the central bank will do something that's unexpected, and the risks at this meeting was that they were going to be more dovish. Since that didn't happen, the krona strengthened back towards 870, where it's trading about there right now. If we look a little bit ahead, our sort of current view on the SEK is that we should see the SEK strengthening versus the euro basically between now and the middle of next year, because at the end of the day, the Swedish economy is still a lot stronger than many of the other Western economies, and particularly Euroland. And because of that, we do see the Riksbank being one of the central banks starting to tighten policy early on, at least if we compare to the ECB. That should strengthen the SEK over time.
Riksbank also raised its unemployment outlook for 2014 to 8.1% from 7.8%, even though it actually predicted growth will accelerate to 1.5% this year and 2.8% next year. Now, do you agree with these predictions?
So we have a similar forecast as the Riksbank actually, so it's basically the same. We've had a higher unemployment forecast than the Riksbank for quite some time now, so they moved their unemployment forecast basically more in line with our unemployment forecast. So it looks like their labor market scenario is more credible now than it was before. The reason why unemployment stays so high, even though they have sort of a gradual increase in GDP growth, is that there is a quite large increase in the population the coming years and in the labor force. So it's people coming into the labor force pushing up unemployment. So if you instead look at employment, it's still the case that the forecast is that employment will continue to increase. So it's actually not as a negative labor market scenario as the unemployment rate might indicate.
And finally, what type of actions are you expecting to see from Riksbank for the rest of the year?
We have a main forecast that they will stay on hold this year, basically, and that the first rate hike will appear somewhere to the middle of next year. The risks to that scenario is definitely on the downside. What could happen is, of course, that if we look at the situation right now, what the Riksbank is saying is that basically they could have cut the repo rate if they only were to look at inflation and the labor market. But since they also look at financial stability and the household debt situation, they choose not to do it. So if if the labor market scenario becomes weaker than the Riksbank forecast and inflation gets lower, which is a possibility, then it's clear that they might be sort of forced in to cut the repo rate even though they don't want to do it. So the main scenario is unchanged from here on and the rest of this year, but the risk is definitely tilted towards a rate cut rather than anything else during this year.
Thank you very much, Mikael. Well, viewers, that is it for right now, but do tune back in tomorrow for the BOE and ECB rate decisions. But for now, have a great day.